Okay, we're live. So we're here with Mauro Oliveira, and Mauro was one of the Monsanto 10. He was arrested, or the Monsanto 10 was arrested on May 22nd in 2017 at the Woodland Monsanto plant for an action. They were charged initially with failure to comply and trespassing. And they have just been, they just finished their trial, and I'm going to have Mauro go ahead and give you an update on what happened. So thanks for being here, Mauro, and appreciate your time. Can you tell us about your case?
Sure. It's good to be here. Thank you, Michael, always for the opportunity. Yeah, we spent almost a year getting to trial. See, that was our 6th court appearance when we finally started a trial. And then we had one full day where the state presented its case. And then we had to come back for the defense. But when we got back, the judge it was quashed at that point. They acquitted it. So let me back up all the way to the action and explain what we did. We have an annual shutdown of Monsanto. Oops, did I lose you there? I did. There. Okay.
Yeah, I still see you.
We have an annual shutdown of Monsanto, and it was their seed operations in Woodland, California, which is the largest seed manipulation facility in the world, as far as we know. And so this is where a lot of the dreaded GMOs and a lot of the hybrid and full mutated seeds are created. And it's about 26 acres, and it's a real hard facility to lock down. So we were really just concentrating on the front gate. Unbeknownst to Monsanto, their back gate was locked. We locked it. But then we moved to the front gate, and we all got together around 5 in the morning. We staged right there at 5. We were together at 4, and we moved over to Monsanto, and the police were already there and everything. And then they immediately tried to get us out of the way, which is a tactic they've used before, but we usually just press them, and then they stop pushing back. In the past, we know that Monsanto didn't want the publicity of arrests, so they told the police pretty much, push on them, but don't take it to an arrest. So this year, and I can only assume it's because the Monsanto people, one in particular, is in the Trump administration, and I don't think they care anymore. I think, the whole sensitivity of this nation has been dulled with this president and, since 9/11. So this was really a turning point. Now I think they're going to push back. And we saw it at Standing Rock. We see it in a lot of places. They're running over people now. They're making laws where it's gray area now, where maybe you can just run your car over an activist. I know in Arizona they were trying to let that happen, and over in North Dakota letting that happen, and trying to make the law so you could run somebody over. So the whole atmosphere of activism has changed. So we got it when we were arrested in minutes, and all 10 of us were arrested. We were allegedly blocking the driveway, and they arrested us on 3 misdemeanor charges, which were trespassing and resisting arrest, failure to comply, something like that. And we spent a couple hours in handcuffs, and I spent as long as 11 hours, I think, in jail that day. And then when we got to court, the first time for the arraignment, we were surprised that the DA had dropped the charges down to an infraction, and they called it loitering. And so they took our First Amendment arrest, which could have been trespassing. That would have been a legitimate fair fight, and resisting arrest. Those are all what we're used to getting. But they dropped it to this infraction, which took away the jury trial, which meant that we weren't going to be up there convincing, our peers why we were there, which of course is because of the glyphosate. Is in 9 out of 10 of us, especially you down there in Southern California, we're hearing that glyphosate is really present in all your bodies, and all the other reasons that we can attack Monsanto on a legal basis. is what we wanted to do. Get this into a courtroom, no matter what, however we do it, but we talk about Monsanto. And even if we lose, it's worth it to get the publicity, even if we get the misdemeanor charges and it goes on our record. But by dropping into infraction, they took away the jury trial. They took away our right to a public defender. And now it was going to be a judge to decide everything. Well, we immediately fought back on that, and we started subpoenaing, and I have to give the credit to Bob Saunders, who, you know, we were all pro se except for two of us. We had two pro bono attorneys that were helping us from the guild, but Bob really wrote some incredible briefs, and he's just one of us, and you know, he's an incredible activist, and he wrote briefs that even the attorneys joined, and we joined a couple of their motions, and they joined ours that Bob wrote. And Bob was subpoenaing the cops and subpoenaing Monsanto executives. And so we get all the way to the first day of trial, and there's no Monsanto executives in the room, and the police that were subpoenaed weren't there. And normally this would result, if it was on our side, this would result in a bench warrant, and they would put in a warrant out for our arrest for not showing up. But instead, the judge kicked it down the road another 90 days, and he said, oh, you know, in the interest of cross-examination, we're just going to postpone this. And that got those cops and the Monsanto executives off the hook. But that was the first time, too, that we saw a Monsanto lawyer in the room. And I'm figuring every hour of him is $400 to $500. So this was beginning to toll up on their side, even though we had already been there a few times for arraignments, and you know, they had to bring the DA out, and it's costing them money there, too. But now it's really starting to cost at least Monsanto money. And so we finally get to trial the next time, which was about 2 weeks ago. And this time, the Sergeant Machado is there and a lieutenant. And those two barrage of cross-examination from us, where it came out pretty clear that, number one, nobody had ever used the word loitering. No cop, not one of 20 cops ever said loitering that morning. They threatened us with the misdemeanor arrest, and that's how they arrested us. The DA later swapped it to loitering, and for some crazy judicial reason, the judge allowed it, which in our minds already put this at the appellate level. We didn't care if we were going to lose at this point. In fact, several of us, and I think in the end, all of us felt that it would have been a higher moral ground to lose this case so we could go after the loitering charge, which would also help the homeless. They've been changing the loitering charges across the country all year in the last 2 years to keep homeless from sitting down, from laying down, and even from feeding them. You can get a loitering charge. So we thought if we could go after the loitering charge, which the Supreme Court threw a lot of doubt that loitering was even a legal thing. In fact, they spelled it out that way, that loitering was unconstitutional. So for the states to be running around charging people with loitering when you're protesting, we couldn't let that stand for the sake of all activists, especially in the Ninth Circuit where we work. So we were determined to, you know, lose this case or have them dismiss it. But like I said, the better way would have been to lose the case. But when we came back after proving to the judge that the sheriff didn't even know where the line was there, because to be charged with loitering, you have to be on public property. And that morning they were telling us we were on Monsanto property and we were trespassing. So everything switches around. The government does whatever they want to do to change the story, whatever. And this was all coming out really clear. And whether the judge was going to go along with them in the beginning, he certainly wasn't going to after we tore it apart in public in front of some press. You know, and he knew by our words and my words in particular. I told him right at the stand, I hope we lose today, Your Honor, because this loitering needs to be at the appellate level. And for you to even have it in your courtroom is just absurd. So I think they knew all along that after a whole year of dealing with us, now they were going to have to deal with us at another time and maybe get this from the top down. You know, maybe some of their higher ups were going to say, you know, you've pushed it too far to the judicial. So they dropped. The judge came back on the last time we were there, which was our 7th time in court, and he said we were not guilty, and we didn't even have to present testimony because he had deliberated on it, and he really could have done that before and spared me another 6 hours of drive time, but he didn't. He let us all come back, and then he did it that way. So that's where we stand. And interestingly enough, the DA dropped out of this case before the first day of trial. He basically handed the entire thing to the judge and said, you deal with it, which is really bizarre because he's the one who threw these charges at us. So I think the judge, you know, probably felt a little bit perturbed on that side and then overwhelmed with the subpoenas and everything else. And, you know, all activists ought to take this one to heart, because if you come back in full force, even when the odds are against you and you're clearly arrested, you're sitting down in an area where you're absolutely sure that you're guilty of some charge and you're willing to do that, it can turn around. And I've seen it happen 9 times out of 10. If you just push it, you'll find a hole in their story, a hole in the way they did it, some misjustice along the way, and you'll win the case.
Excellent. I like that. I like that lesson for activists. Hey, so you covered the case really well. Let me give a little summary. So after your arrest was for trespassing and failure to comply, which were misdemeanors, which was a higher level of basically you could have had jail time, right?
Right. In fact, we sat in jail that first day.
Yeah. And then they reduced it to loitering. And I think you believe it's because they didn't want Monsanto to go on trial themselves.
That's correct.
And then several dates, Monsanto didn't even, or I think the prosecution didn't even show up for the trials, right? And that's
they didn't have to once they handed it to the judge.
Uh-huh. So then what your intention was to go to trial and put Monsanto to trial and put like you said, the loitering law on trial as well, to set a precedence for future cases, which is a very intelligent legal action, right? I think that's brilliant. And one more thing I wanted to add that you talked about last time in our previous interview was that you think maybe there was some cooperation between Monsanto and the DA so that Monsanto would not have to testify. And during discovery for this case, you were hoping to get emails that would say, or that would show that, proof of that.
Yeah.
And did those emails ever come up in discovery?
No, they didn't come up in discovery. And we made it a point of dismissal that we weren't given full evidence that was, evidence and the things that we asked for. However, the lieutenant admitted to meeting with Monsanto on May 3rd and having a meeting with them about the arrest and what they wanted. And, we asked them to disclose everything in the meeting. Of course, he's only going to tell us what he wants to, because as long as there's not a tape recording of that, there's no way to pin him to it. But yeah, they met and there was a discussion about what they were going to do about us, which all comes down to they knew it was a protest and they admitted this under oath. We saw your Facebook page. We knew you were coming in numbers. We knew it was a protest. So how do you box that into a loitering charge? Only by misusing the judicial system.
Right. And I think the judge saw that, and that's why the acquittal came. Now, I did read that he acquitted everyone before he heard the defense's testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so, again, did the judge do this out of the justice, or did he do it just, to keep the ball somewhat in Monsanto's court and in Yolo County's court? Because now even the sheriff's department, we could turn around and sue them now. We have a false arrest. We can bring all this back and show, well, yeah, they didn't even know where these lines were. Monsanto didn't even know where their property line was. The lawyer said he didn't know. And then he went a step further and said the sentence, and Monsanto doesn't know.
Interesting.
So at this time, he said, at this time. So maybe they had to go and look at their paperwork. But in the meantime, we went out and we did our homework and we know where it is.
Uh-huh.
And we were clearly we were clearly in Monsanto's court. So had they stuck with the trespassing charge, they would have won. Had there not been any other travesties of justice or screw ups with the arrest, which perhaps we would have chewed that apart too, because we had a lot of extra bullets that we didn't shoot.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it sounds like you did really well in the courtroom. What's planned next for Monsanto? Do you have a next stage?
Yeah, they really inspired the next action. May 21st is the next action, and we're combining this action with the loss of our friend. One of the Monsanto 10, Andy Conn, passed away about a month before the trial, and Andy would want us to hold his ceremony for him for an action. I know he would. Although we're doing one at a private location, and we're going to party for Andy, sure. But which he would want. That's exactly what he would want. But also, we're going to take it to Monsanto. We're going to bring Andy back to Monsanto because Andy has organized many of these shutdowns as the #1 organizer, as the primary guy. And so we're going back to Monsanto May 21st, and we've got all kinds of stuff happening. And I'm not going to say what it is, but Monsanto, I just want you to know we're coming, and we're bringing a lot of toys with us.
Awesome. Look forward to that. Sounds like we're going to have a follow-up interview.
Yeah, let's do that.
Excellent. Hey, so can you talk a little bit about Roundup and how that's so bad for the environment? I know that was kind of the primary reason you went there. Yeah,
glyphosate in Roundup, same chemicals that were in Agent Orange, and most of the world has banned glyphosate and Roundup. There are countries that won't even allow Monsanto back in because of it. And the thing about glyphosate, it's spreading all over the country. It's skipping along the top of the water, getting into the water system. It's blowing in the wind when they use it on crops, and it's ending up in non-GMO crops, non-pesticide crops. And Monsanto used to pull, and they still do, they pull this where if their pollen of their seeds gets into another crop, and therefore if my corn had Monsanto genes in it, they would sue me for that, even though they trespassed onto my property. They would sue me for the property right, the copyright. And with glyphosate, for some reason, they haven't tried that tactic. We have glyphosate in our body, but they're not suing you and me for running around with their patented materials in us. And I think they're not doing that because that just is totally insane. But it's the same thing they were doing with the seeds, which is totally insane. When their pollen comes onto my property, then they sue me because their pollen's on my property. So what we need to do, and what's starting to happen, are class action lawsuits. People need to sue Monsanto when they find glyphosate in their body. Everybody needs to go out and do the hair test, blood test, find the glyphosate, and turn around and join a class action lawsuit or sue them on your own if you're comfortable with that. And we need to really just put this monster out of its misery. And class action lawsuits like that can bring a company down. Glyphosate, most of the world feels it's a carcinogenic. The governor of California said it was a carcinogenic. There's studies in the US that say it's a carcinogenic. But of course, Monsanto can get a few scientists here and there to say, oh, no, it's all great. In fact, they even said things like you could drink it. So we've never seen them drink it. So, bottom line is we have a poison, and we have a company, a malicious company whose name means my saint. The French means mon is my, and in Portuguese, Santos is saint. So this is a very diabolical company. I feel that, there's a lot more than just capitalism involved here. There are some really dark thinking brains doing whatever it is they do at, on their altars, on their prayers, to make this thing where Americans just allow glyphosate. It's like, well, it's almost like there's fairy dust on everybody. Why wouldn't we react to being sprayed? It's like them coming up with a sprayer into your face. Why wouldn't we react like human beings and go fight or flight? You would put that problem out of your way. So we need to do that as a species, as Americans. We need to do that and join the rest of the world and get this company off the planet.
Yes, I agree. So your next action is on May 21st. Maybe we should keep in touch and see if we can get you more help one way or another with our local groups, or maybe with using the media as well.
We need a lot of help. Our numbers have been really low on these actions, which is weird because we've been shutting them down up until this last time. Usually when you shut something down, people go, "Oh, wow, that was good. Let's join in next time."
Right.
We haven't seen that. And again, I blame that on the fluoride, maybe even the glyphosate itself. All these chemicals are making us not react with our DNA, and our DNA should be in survival mode right now because we're in the 6th grade extinction. We should be fighting for our lives with this and with everything else that is screwing us up.
Yeah, you always see a new article about a species on its last leg of existence, and it's pretty sad. It seems like it's happening very fast.
Let me plug Sudan right there.
Sure.
Sudan is the last male northern white rhino alive, and he's sick right now. And up until just a few days ago, it looked like he may not survive the week or two. But I've heard there's been a slight uplift in his health, and there are 2 females that he can be mated with. Although he physically can't do it, it would be an in vitro kind of thing. But yeah, Sudan should be in everybody's prayers right now. And the vaquita porpoise, which there maybe is just as few as 2 or 3 left in the Sea of Cortez. They think there's about 30, but these animals need our attention. They need our spiritual attention, and they need us to physically act in ways that help them.
Excellent. And offshore drilling and chemicals washing into our ocean doesn't help those things.
No.
I appreciate that. Hey, let's talk about your corporation, Soul Communications. You're the executive director there. What do you guys do there? What kind of projects do you take on?
Well, Soul is 21 years old, and we've taken on projects from, we were running supply lines to we started it running the supply line of food, communications equipment, and whatever else was needed by the Dene grandmothers, or the Navajo grandmothers that were resisting forced relocation. They were 26 years into the resistance when we got on board, and we picked up for 5 or 6 years and brought massive amounts of supplies to them to keep them going. And then Soul branched out from there into many other projects. We were the UA Defense Fund until we handed it off to Rainforest Action Network because it had to get bigger than we were. And we lost Terry Freitas and 2 Native women in that campaign that were murdered in that campaign by, you know, the FARC, the Colombian guerrilla groups, as they're called. But we think there's more involved there. We think that, you know, there's a good chance that Occidental Oil themselves it had influence on that. And I can't go too far into that because I don't want to get sued by them. But there's plenty of indications by the timeline of events that show that there was, you know, there is communication between FARC and Oxy Oil. Oxy would have their top brass as they entered Colombia. They would be kidnapped, and the FARC would demand $1 million ransom. Well, after a while, Oxy just started paying the ransom before the employee got down there, which is totally illegal, and the State Department kiboshed that because at that point you're funding a terrorist group. So there was a lot of communication between those 2 organizations. And then we branched off into stopping the clear cutting in Northern California, and our group Battle Creek Alliance is still doing that. We've been in court several times. We joined with the Trinidad Tree Sitters to put tree sits into a stronger position, and teamed up with John Densmore of the Doors, who helped fund the communications package over there. And more we're getting into direct action. And you know, to me, it's the only thing working anymore. So our battles in court over the clear cutting have all resulted in losses on our side and absurd rulings, kind of like what we were seeing with the Monsanto, absolutely absurd rulings, where they are able to take the California Environmental Quality Act and the Forest Protection Act and use those acts to clear cut a forest, to make a vacant lot out of it. So, I mean, it's absurd just on the names and the spirit of those acts. But again, we found loopholes in the law, and the judge admitted that. He's like, well, there's a hole here. And rather than citing the spirit of the law and going against the timber industry and the state of California for allowing these accumulated clear cuts to impact an entire area, they would go with the loophole, which actually allowed them to do it. So he would say that our remedy is legislative, but that means going back to the Congress of California and getting them to change the law. And that takes a long time. And of course, we've been trying that. We've been trying that all along. Center for Biological Diversity is in there all the time. And EPIC and many other groups have been trying that. So recently, Sol took on the Ecofeminist, the 3rd annual Ecofeminist Conference is going to be one of our fiscal clients. And we also took on a new uranium and water protection, anti-uranium mining over in the Four Corners, where we were with the Big Mountain Project and that supply line. Those same elders and their descendants, because many of those have passed on, are fighting now the reintroduction of uranium mining over in the Four Corners, which is crazy because the first time the contamination is still there. It's all over the place. And we were finding hot piles in the Painted Desert because the Hubble family that was running the uranium mining back, in the 50s and 60s, they were dumping hot piles of colorful rock where there was other piles of colorful rock that were natural in the Painted Desert. It's a great way to hide it. And we had, elders that were telling us that when they were kids, they were part of this. They were on those work crews, or they sat on the donkey that brought the uranium ore up out of the valleys. And so, we witnessed their testimony as well as their cancer. We witnessed a lot of their family's cancer, and the number of miscarriages was just it's like had to be leading the nation. It was incredible what we were hearing from the Navajo people. So we're back with them again with this new project, and we also have another project, another new one, several new ones, but another big one is a water documentary, The Last Drop, it's called. And Leanna Hosea from the BBC is working with us, and she's at Flint and Standing Rock and out on the Navajo Nation with that uranium and water group, and they're working together to finish documentary. We also have a new radio show called the Women's Empower Hour, or it's called Our Empower Hour, which is a women's group out of Big Bend, California. Some 70 women are part of that group, and about 20 of them are working on this radio program with KFOI, Freedom of Information, which is in Redding, California. So yeah, we're branching out quickly, and we're pushing out in a bigger way than we ever have before. We've always been very careful to stay in there's two different classes of a nonprofit. There's ones that work under 50,000 a year, and there's ones that work over 50,000 that get extreme scrutiny from the IRS. And we've always avoided that. But now we are big enough, and we're pushing ahead that we don't really care about the scrutiny anymore because of the vaquita, because of Sudan, because of the extinctions. We don't have time to tiptoe anymore. And that's true with all my activity and all my actions and all the people that I'm working with. We all feel the same way. We don't have time to mess around. We have to just go for it every time, each and every time we're out there.
Yes, it's urgent. I agree. And it sounds like Soul Communications is a good resource for people to understand what's going on with the destruction of our planet and our environment. So can you give us your website? So if people want, is there a way to donate as well?
Yes, soulcommunications.org. And I think there's a PayPal there, but you can also donate by sending to Soul, SOL, Signal of Love. And that's Box 225, Montgomery Creek, California, 96065, and we'll send you back a donation receipt and let you know where your money went. Or if you specifically want to go to one of the projects I just mentioned, just memo that, and that's what'll happen.
Okay. after this video, I'll ask you for websites you want me to post in the description, whether it's Soul or the radio station or the media outlet that you were talking about. Hey, I wanted to ask you about one more thing. Is you had an action in 2015 at the Creech Air Force Base. Can you talk about that action and what you were trying to accomplish?
Creech Air Force Base is just outside Las Vegas, and they are, as far as I know, they're still the primary assassin in the drone program. And so the Creech pilots sit in their Barca loungers in little trailers, and they launch aircraft from the Mideast or Africa, as we now know. The Intercept has done a big story on that. And they're launching aircraft from there, and they're sending missiles down into homes or cars to attack, you know, one of our primary terrorist targets. You remember the deck of cards? Well, a lot of those guys went out in the assassination program. The only problem is they rarely, and in fact, I've never heard of them just hitting their target. Sometimes they kill as many as 70 to 80 people in a single strike, and only one of those persons is their target. So many children have been killed. And the thing that Americans have to realize is, number one, this is happening with your tax dollar. That's the most important thing. And number two, this is happening in countries where we're not at war. Congress hasn't declared war. There's no declaration of war. It's an illegal action all the way around. But again, we've seen our government, you know, cite 9/11 and the war of terror as reasons to do illegal actions by calling them legal, and they're not. It's like the torture program was not legal, and later, you know, it really came out that way. So Creech Air Force Base fires these missiles, and we go there to highlight this and get arrested, and we've done some very artistic actions out there, where the kids come in with a coffin full of baby parts, and we go to the gate and we blow up that coffin, because there are things called double tapping and triple tapping. The United States will target somebody, kill them, and then when people come in to rush in to help, which are, you know, good people helping somebody that they don't even know who that is, it's blown up on the ground, but they rush in to help. And they get blown up because they circle around again with the drone and they hit it again. That's called a double tap. And then they show up at the funeral, and that's called a triple tap. And they'll shoot at the funeral. And I mean, it's just crazy that Americans would think that that is something that represents the American flag or the founding fathers or the Declaration of Independence or whatever you wrap your mind around is the United States, who we are, this great, magnificent thing. No, we are killers, and we're assassins. So Creech is where it's happening, and there's actions in October. And usually at the end of March or 1st of April, there's the big action. And that's coming up probably led by Toby Blomé and Code Pink and the Women in Black. They're usually a big part of that. Veterans for Peace are a big part of that, the Nevada Desert Experience. So if you look them up on Facebook, there's usually a page by now that'll lead you to the next Creech action.
Excellent. I looked them up. I couldn't find anything on it, but if I can, I'll post that in the description as well.
We're struggling with numbers there. Again, just like the other actions I mentioned, our actions keep getting smaller, and it's crazy because we're making a dent. When you're winning, you expect the numbers to grow.
Right. I think people are overwhelmed with so many issues that they're trying to combat these days. I think we're being hit on so many different levels. Activists, progressive activists. I think we're a little overwhelmed. I think is why we see sometimes why we see the decrease in numbers. But I'm hoping that America wakes up with media like this and people like you who are shedding light where there was darkness, and we do get those actions manned so that we can make some progress. Mauro, I thank you for being here and talking to us. And I wish you luck in your future actions. Again, May 21st is going to be the next Monsanto action. So I think we should, you and I should work together to try to promote that.
Yes.
And get something going, you know?
Thank you.
And also I wanted to say about the Creech action is that here in our area, we're trying to get an anti-war movement together as well. So we were actually teamed with Code Pink and a couple of events that we did. So hopefully we can collaborate on that too. I'd love to see some, like you said, bigger numbers.
Yeah, any way I can help you.
Yes, yes, excellent. Thanks, Mauro. Well, thanks for being here. Again, touch base with me on Facebook to get the email. I'm sorry, not the emails, but the websites that you want posted in the description. And I'm sure I will talk to you again.
Thank you so much, Michael.
All right, Mauro. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.